And he's the author of, most recently, Socialist Insecurity, Pensions and the Politics of Uneven Development in China. And he's also a member of our first Public Intellectuals program. And Gao Qin is a member of the third Public Intellectuals program. Fourth, sorry.
Yeah.
And we have Leo Sada, who's a member of the fifth, the most recent Public Intellectual program. So we have a illustrious cohort here. And Gao Qin is professor at Columbia at the Weatherhead Institute. She's a faculty affiliate of the Columbia Population Research Center and of the Weatherhead East Asia Institute. And she's the director of the Columbia University's China Center for Social Policy. She's an academic board member of the China Institute for Income Distribution at Beijing Normal University. And before she came to Columbia, she was professor and coordinator of the International Initiatives at Fordham. Dr. Gao's research interests are the Chinese welfare state in transition, the effectiveness and the impacts of dibao, China's social assistance program, which she talks about in her book, and gender inequality. So welcome, Dr. Gao. Dr. Fraser, please go forward.
Thank you.
Thanks for putting this on. This is a really exciting day for me. I remember when, I think when I first got to New York in 2012, among other things happening like Hurricane Superstorm Sandy, I set up a meeting with Gao to have coffee because I had read so much of her work when I was publishing the aforementioned Socialist Insecurity, the way she was able to measure income inequality. And even then we started talking about how, and you came to give a talk at the India-China Institute with Carl Riskin when you were a visiting scholar there on sabbatical, and we were beginning to see how China's, the curve was beginning to bend, that the income inequality levels, which had been rising, of course, since 1980, had begun to peak and even come down a little bit. And I remember Carl that night said, this is a potentially hugely important thing, and we need to understand what's causing it. And I think you and I were talking before, we still don't know what's causing the decline in income inequality. It may just be slower economic growth, but I think we've determined that the minimum livelihood guarantee may not be a hugely contributing factor to that reduction in income inequality, but it's certainly a contributing factor to the lowering of poverty rates. And we talked about your idea for this book manuscript, and I said, well, there's so many people writing articles in various specialized journals about dibao, but a book is a great idea. And so here we are, 2017. You did very quick work. I have to congratulate you for producing a book, and I can't wait to hear more about it. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Mark. It's wonderful. I feel like we are having a reunion because Mark was one of the first people who I talked to when I had the idea of writing this book, and he encouraged me and also shared experiences, insights about writing a book. So it's wonderful. And yes, Mark hosted me as a visiting scholar at the new school, India-China Institute, where I was able to do some of the writing and putting together of the information. So thank you. I also want to thank the National Committee, especially the PIP program, where I first presented this manuscript and got a lot of helpful comments, which I actually acknowledge in my book. So wonderful product, partly through the PIP. So I'm going to talk about the book, and it's really China's experimentation with social welfare. And my book is a thorough evaluation of whether this works or not. So what is dibao, or the minimum livelihood guarantee? It's China's primary social assistance program. It's the world's largest such program right now. It covers 60 million people, about 45 million in rural areas and 15 million in urban areas at this moment. About 3 years ago, there were 70 million recipients in this program. It started in Shanghai in 1993 because of the urban economic reforms many companies had layoffs, and these newly laid off people became the new urban poor. They couldn't earn a living successfully in the labor market, and the local government feared they would cause social instability. So Shanghai government started this program, and soon it was adopted by 6 other cities. And by 1999, the central government decided this program is working well and much needed. So 1999, it was implemented nationwide in urban areas. And it's not until 2007 it was implemented nationwide in rural areas. So how does it work? It's a very typical means-tested welfare program, as many other countries have. It targets the poor, but it's not an automatic transfer. You have to go through means testing. I call it that it involves 2.5 of testing. The first test is income and assets. Your income has to be below the local threshold for getting the dibao benefit, and it's locally set and different for urban and rural areas within each locality. Some places are more demanding of the asset test. So in some places you cannot have a refrigerator, you cannot have a mobile phone, etc. You certainly cannot have a car to qualify for this benefit. So those vary quite a bit, but the expectation is that you're not only income poor, you're also asset poor. You shouldn't be able to hold onto assets to qualify for this benefit. The second test is the household registration status test, which is hukou test. You have to be having the local hukou in order to benefit from this program. That excludes the rural to urban migrants. In 2015, estimated to be 169 million, who couldn't get either the urban or the rural dibao benefits. Some localities are loosening that rule a little bit, but it's still very hard as a migrant to get the benefit. The half test, which I call, is a soft test. It's not written in the books in the localities, in the local governments, but you have to follow certain behavioral expectations. For example, you cannot have a pet. If you could afford a pet, that means you're too rich to qualify for this benefit. In some places, you cannot send your kids to a private school or even a public but very a school that requires you to pay some. That means you still have the extra resources. So that's a behavioral test which is not always explicitly stated, but there. It's centrally regulated, which means the central government sets out the broad rules, and the local governments are in charge of setting up their local lines and implementing this program. It serves the dual function of providing a last resort safety net for the poor, but also to maintain a level of social control and to maintain political stability. And that is not so different from similar programs in other countries either. What's probably unique about dibao in China as compared to other welfare programs is its very stringent screening process. This is the procedure every applicant has to go through. You submit the application, then the local committee, local officials would come to do a home visit to understand your income and asset situation. And then they would invite community members to participate in the appraisal of your situation. And once that's done, your names are publicly displayed so that the community members can give input to decide whether you truly qualify or deserve this benefit or not. After that, local governments often randomly select from those who get approval a small proportion to double check, to verify your qualifications, and then you get approved. After that, every 3 months or 6 months or 1 year, you have to do this again so that your eligibility didn't change. So here are some samples of the public display of the name lists in the communities. Some are more formal than others. This one actually lists the people who participate in the appraisal. So the 民主评议小组, so the committee members who help make the decision, right?
Yeah. Where is this? Where's
These
the
are
picture?
from different localities all over the country. I have many such pictures. They're similar. Some are more detailed. Some includes even your ID number, 身份证号, your phone numbers. Often some would include how many people are in your family. This one shows the names of this family, husband, wife, and the child who is 14 years old. So it's a public
Yeah.
effort. So is it working? In terms of benefit adequacy, whether this is sufficient, the benefits are kept low despite constant growth. So this picture shows the dibao lines, the average national, urban, and rural dibao lines. As you can see, it's an average of the whole country within urban and rural areas, and there is a huge variation. But this is the average monthly yuan within urban and rural areas respectively. You could see both lines are growing constantly. This picture adds onto the previous picture the red bars, which accounts for inflation, right? So what we see here is after accounting for inflation or consumer prices, the growth continues, but the growth rate is much slower. The pace of growth is much slower. This picture shows the average dibao lines, again within urban and rural areas separately, as a percentage of per capita consumption. And the point is dibao lines are kept very low. If we focus on the urban areas, by 2013, the average dibao line was 20% of the average urban consumption level. The rural line is actually higher relative to the rural consumption level. It's at 33%. What about dibao's population coverage? Rural areas has a larger population coverage or number of beneficiaries than urban areas, but both have been declining in recent years. So this picture shows two sets of bars where are the number of beneficiaries. Within urban, the blue bars, and within rural areas, the red bars. And the two lines are the proportion of urban and rural populations. This is urban, this is rural, as the proportion of the urban and rural populations, respectively. The urban population coverage at this point, slightly above 2%. That means 2% of the urban population, not even 2.5, are getting dibao. In rural areas, above 8%. So the population coverage really is much bigger in rural areas. However, they have both been declining in recent years. So there is an effort to narrow dibao's coverage in both urban and rural areas. Who are the dibao beneficiaries? This picture shows in 2014 the urban and rural composition of the dibao beneficiaries. What we notice is the majority, 62%, here almost half in rural areas, are working age adults. These are people who either cannot get a job in the labor market to support themselves, to earn a living, or they have responsibilities to care for family members. So these are mostly people working age with the ability to work but cannot support themselves. Among the urban areas, we have only 2% who are working steadily, about 20% who have temporary jobs. The others are unemployed, either registered or non-registered. And then we have 20% children, 16% older people in rural areas, a lot of older people, 40% were dibao beneficiaries because of the lack of pension support in rural areas. How is dibao targeting? It's a targeted anti-poverty program. Are they targeting the right people? There are a lot of targeting errors, but according to international comparison, dibao is actually working better than many other countries.
Can you explain that a little more?
Mhm.
What do you mean when you say
Yeah.
targeting errors?
So supposedly, if you apply for dibao benefits, your income is judged below the local dibao line threshold, you qualify. So you are the target. However, in reality, some people whose income is above the dibao line get it, right? That I call mistargeting. So you're not supposed to be targeted, you're targeted. So those are the mistargeting rate. On the other hand, I should be able to get the dibao benefit, but I didn't get it. Those are people who are leaked. I call them the leakage rate or exclusion rate, exclusion error. So these are estimates based on different data sets, national survey data sets. And we see the light bar showing the leakage rate, the people who are erroneously excluded as a proportion of those, all the beneficiaries. So the leakage rate ranged between 42% and 72%, very high. And then on the other hand, there's also mistargeting rate, people who shouldn't be getting it but actually get it, again ranging between 40% and 76%. So on both sides, there are a lot of errors.
And that's
And-
better than a lot of countries?
Yes.
Wow.
Yeah, these are for urban areas. For rural areas, both of these error rates are much higher. But, yes?
I mean, why is it there's a big difference in between the rural and urban?
Because rural
areas?
income is just hard to get.
Everybody-
Rural income is seasonal, right? You don't get a steady income every month, and that's hard for people to estimate and report, and hard for the local officials to gather the information. In rural, yeah.
And I also I can understand why some people may be mistargeted, but I don't see why there are still such a high percentage of people who are licked out of this
Mhm.
program.
Some people don't apply.
Oh.
In my book, I quote one scenario where the family decided they are not going to apply for dibao because they don't want their kid, a middle school student, to be known as a dibao recipient. Because in China, dibao is very public. If you get it, your kid will also get some educational support in school, but that information has to be public, right? So some people don't know about this program. Some people choose not to apply. Some people apply, but somehow the local committee or the neighbors decided they don't qualify, right? So there is a discrepancy between our estimates, which are based on survey data, and the official local officials who implement this program. People may say report different income information to these two different groups. What about anti-poverty effectiveness, right? dibao is an anti-poverty program. Does it work? The anti-poverty effect is modest, especially on the poverty rate. So in poverty research, we often use three measures: the poverty rate, poverty gap, and poverty severity. Poverty rate is the proportion of people who live below the poverty line, right? There are different definitions of poverty lines, but once you set a poverty line, you could estimate the poverty rate percentage. The poverty gap is how far below you fall the poverty line, right? Poverty rate could be the same, but you could be in deep poverty or shallow poverty. That's poverty gap. Poverty severity means mathematically it's calculated by the square of the poverty gap, right? That gives more weight to those people in deep poverty, right? The more people are in deep poverty, the more severe poverty is. So this is one set of estimates among the dibao recipients for this set of estimates, dibao reduced the poverty rate by 21%, but for poverty gap 33%, for poverty severity 38%. So not huge reductions, but the effect is larger for poverty gap and poverty severity, which suggests that the majority of dibao benefits do benefit those who suffer the most. But for the general population, if we look at the broad population, the effects are very small. Do these people just rely on welfare? Do they move from welfare to work? There are many local initiatives to help promote work. However, there's very little evidence whether they work or not. So here are some of the local welfare to work initiatives. They range from being punitive to protective, offering incentive, and being supportive. So being punitive is to say, okay, you receive dibao, you have to participate in mandatory voluntary work. You have to do it, but it's called voluntary work. If you don't do it, we are going to take away your dibao.
When you say voluntary, is this work that's unpaid?
Yeah, unpaid.
Well,
It's
except for the
basic-
dibao.
Right, it's basically in exchange for the dibao.
Right.
Yeah, so it's your obligation to put up some work to earn your dibao benefits.
But it's not
And this
regular
is-
enough to be considered a job or work.
Right, yeah, if you reject, you may say this doesn't work for me, but if you reject 2 or 3 times, your dibao is in danger.
Can you give the example, what kind of work?
Sweeping the yard of the, right,
But it's for the
community.
it's for the government entity that gave you the dibao.
Yes,
So
all these are local, locally proposed and implemented.
and when you say local, is it in the district or is it the city as a whole? Or the
It could be either, yeah.
So whatever entity gave you the job,
Right.
that's who you work for.
Yeah, 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 yeah. So there's one example, a dibao recipient was asked to be保安, security guard, and the hours just don't work for his family. He quit, and then his dibao was taken away. So there are many such situations. But then local officials know this doesn't work. So there are other initiatives to help address this issue. The protective measure is to say, okay, if you earn somehow this month, you have a job, you earn 200 yuan more, we are going to disregard that income so that you could still stay on dibao and keep working. So in 3 months, if you can keep this job, then we will discount it from your dibao benefit, right? So it's to protect your work efforts. Then the next one is to offer incentive, similar to the protective measure. If you find a job, we are not going to take your dibao benefits right away. We are going to gradually phase out your benefits so that you could transition to being self-reliant. And lastly, there are local job trainings, skills trainings, job referrals, so that dibao beneficiaries could find job opportunities and find to move from welfare to work. But these are all local experiments. Really, no systematic evaluations exist. So in my book, I cited 2. One is done by me and my colleagues in Shanghai about a supportive job training and referral program, limited success. Jen?
So the dibao goes to an individual. What
Yes.
if you're a husband and wife and you both apply for the dibao?
Right, you have to both apply, and you could both qualify with the equal amount or different amount.
So one doesn't cancel. If my husband gets it, then I can still get it.
You can,
Up
yeah.
to a
And
certain level for the family, or is the level the same, or?
so it's individual based. The line is set based on per capita income. And each individual would apply and report his or her income, and be decided whether you qualify, how much you can get. Usually children and older adults can get the full amount.
You get topped up to
Right.
the local set line. of-
Right.
And a person who has a child is rewarded or not? I mean, can you get more if you have a child?
So the child would apply. The child would be an applicant. So it's not because you have a child, you get more. The child has to be the applicant.
But what if, say, I'm unemployed, my wife works full-time, and
Mhm.
she earns income, can I still apply?
You can, but they count the family income.
Oh, they count.
Yeah, yeah. So I think in the public display one, they showed how much each person gets and how much each person is entitled to receive. Yeah. So often they would list household size, how many people live in this household, how many people applied, how many people qualified. So who are these dibao beneficiaries who are struggling with all kinds of barriers to move from welfare to work? In the book, I divided them into individual level, household level, community level, policy level. But individual level poor health is a common challenge to both the recipients themselves and also family members. Community level lack of resources, childcare, senior care services. And then policy level, there are some interesting local policies. For example, some say you cannot set up a vendor. You cannot set up a small business because that will make the street look untidy, disrupt the local economic order. So there are those measures, but there are others. So one controversial one, I think the government in general is struggling with this, is the tied eligibility. So if you qualify for dibao, if you apply and qualify, that opens door for you to get other benefits, such as education assistance if you have a child, such as medical assistance if you have healthcare needs. But if you don't qualify for dibao, you're automatically removed from access to those benefits, which is a big problem. So many dibao recipients in interviews say they don't want to be reliant on dibao. They don't sometimes need dibao, but they are afraid of leaving dibao because otherwise they wouldn't be able to get the education support or housing support, etc. So that is a policy design issue. And similar to many other countries, I think in the US we have that problem, right? For policy makers and implementers, it's easy if there's a clear, simple guideline, but in reality, it complicates things and may not be the optimal choice. So here's one quote from one dibao recipient. She's laid off, 45-year-old, who had to stay home all the time to take care of her 22-year-old son who has a mental illness. She said, "I cannot leave my son. He can't do anything. I have to feed him 3 meals a day. If he were to boil some hot water, I fear he'd get scalded. He's completely without intelligence. If he sees something, he'll want to go play. Like with those electrical plugs, I don't dare to get away. Something terrible could happen to other people." So she could potentially get a job herself, but she cannot leave her son. So her family care responsibility makes her a dibao recipient. How about family consumption? How do these families use this money? Here is some good news. The dibao recipients actually use the money to invest or spend on human capital, which means education and healthcare. So they actually are very clear about their situation. Another quote here, Miss Lee, 43-year-old, who has multiple illnesses, disease, says, "The main expenses are medicine. Every month I have to spend over 100 yuan, nearly 200 on medicine. My daughter and I, our monthly income is 690 yuan dibao money. So we have about 500 left after paying for the medicine. Everything else costs money." So here it's clear they need to spend on healthcare, and that's how they use the money. Another quote, you see, it's almost September 1st, but honestly, I barely have money for food. I don't know where my next meal is from. I get help from this person, that person. When the semester starts, I have to pay over 3,000 yuan, 2,200 for tuition, and the rest fees for textbooks and others. How can I pull together that much money? This is a father who was 44-year-old, whose son is going to a vocational school. So it's not compulsory education. And the research shows that people who have kids going into compulsory education, elementary school, middle school, they are relatively okay. It's the high school, vocational school, college going kids where they need a lot of money, and dibao doesn't pay for that. What about their social lives? Many of the dibao recipients feel isolated and do not have a very fulfilled life. So here I did some quantitative work using a recent national household survey, the China Family Panel Studies done by Beida, to study how people spend their time. And this is to look at the association between dibao receipt and time use patterns. For both urban and rural areas, we see that on both work days, the darker portion, and the non-work days, there's a reduction associated with dibao receipt on leisure and social activities. That's the sum of all the time they spend on leisure and social activities. In the subsequent bars, I show different kinds of activities. So recreational activities using the internet, exercising for urban areas, it's a big reduction because you have to go to the neighborhood to participate in exercising, which could be showing to show that you're enjoying life, and people may not
God forbid.
appreciate that.
Same thing with leisure and social activity.
Right, so all of these are not strictly causal, right? We didn't put them into experiment and say whether you increase or decrease, but these are associations very robustly observed. And these are consistent with the quantitative findings. So here's Mr. Wang, 60-year-old, dibao recipient. Me still having social activities, still hanging out with friends? No. If someone comes to visit, then we figure something out at home, which means they would try to cook something, prepare some food, pleasantries. Basically, I have no social activities these days. The other, only 34-year-old, Mr. Kong, life to me now is relatively bleak. I'm a little scared. I can only manage day by day. And then the last interviewee, 46-year-old, Mr. Wang, we're afraid of other kids laughing at him, their son. Kids nowadays compare with each other. We're afraid that he might have psychological burden. So you can see those social influences, not only on the adults, but also on children who in the school, if they are labeled as a dibao recipient, will be known public knowledge to their peers and teachers as well. So I evaluated all these different outcomes related with dibao receipt. And it's Professor Wang Feng of UC Irvine who, in his review of my book, said these are sobering. I didn't think of that, but I think it's true that dibao is a major undertaking, a lot of money spent on this program, but these are not all encouraging news, right? Some positive outcomes, but many challenges remain. So what can be done? I think we need to make the benefits more generous. Dibao by design is meant to be the lowest of all the benefits. It has to be kept lower than the unemployment insurance. It has to be lower than minimum wage, has to be lower than a life subsidy to those who have no jobs. So it's the minimum of all kinds of government support. And we have to rethink whether that's enough. Then in terms of coverage, it's puzzling. In the recent years, it's been narrowed to 2%, 8%, 2% in urban areas, 8% in rural areas. The government at the same time is trying to promote anti-poverty efforts, but to limit the role of dibao. But I think we have to rethink whether dibao is achieving its intended goals and whether narrowing the population coverage is the right way to go. Then a lot of work needs to be done in providing stronger work support. This is a challenge I think the government is aware of, but they also need to learn how to coordinate the efforts, because dibao is done by the Minzhenbu, Ministry of Civil Affairs. However, work support efforts are not under the charge of civil affairs. So how to work effectively both horizontally with other government departments but also vertically would be a challenge. We also have to recognize the multidimensional needs people face, right? It's not just survival, but education, health, fulfillment, social needs. And I think we need to have a focus on children, maybe to separate children somehow from this overall poverty discussion, because a lot of these children will grow up to be poor. And if we don't think about how to make their life opportunities better, this pattern will repeat. I mean, it's a challenge here in the US, in every other country, but in relation to dibao, it's an important topic. And lastly, I teach in a school of social work. Many of our students, quite many are here today, are going to become social workers. Here in the US, social workers are very effective case managers. They know of all the available resources and they connect families in need to these available resources. How to mobilize that in China and make social work, social services to play the role that they can play will be important, right? Not only social assistance, but social services and social work. There are many proposals to address poverty. One proposal is to just give money to the poor. If they need it, there must be a reason, and cash is the most effective way. Another approach, what do the poor need? Try asking them. If they need education, offer them education support. If they need housing, offer them housing support, right? So these are amazing proposals, but whether they are politically and physically possible, it will be an interesting debate. Lastly, I want to show you this. When I wrote the book on dibao, it's the primary social assistance program. Since then, President Xi Jinping has launched a grand anti-poverty campaign. It's called Targeted Anti-Poverty Project or Campaign, 精准扶贫. And the goal is to eliminate poverty in China by 2020, which is not far from today. So whether that can be achieved and how would that work together with the existing social assistance system would be interesting and an important project. So I will end here and welcome your comments and feedback.
Offer some questions, comments? Sure. So, yeah, I agree with Feng Wang. It's sobering, especially. I mean, I think I could tell others also reacting when you describe the stigmatization, the public display, and I think also this notion of that you have to be invisible.
Mm-hmm.
It's very problematic. I think it shows us that when you say X million people have been brought out of poverty, whether through this program or others, that it comes with some downsides. And so, as you were saying there at the end, how do you manage it if you have a campaign to eliminate poverty? Well, if it means that you can't go outside, even though you're out of poverty, it just seems very problematic. And it shows you that it's not all about cash and your income. Your life and your assessment of your life is much more than just a payment that raises you a little bit above a poverty line. So Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned the importance of the fact that this is a Ministry of Civil Affairs
Mhm.
bureaucracy program and not the bureaucracy I'm much more familiar with, the
Right.
Ministry of Labor and Social
Yes.
Security, which has the whole social insurance
Yes.
plus the labor enforcement and all of
Yeah.
that. And I know there was some back and forth and invariable competition when
Yeah.
they were designing this program of who would get it. But would it be better for this to be handled with the Social Security people who are also handling unemployment insurance and pensions and who have far more resources as a bureaucracy
Yeah.
than Ministry of Civil Affairs. So that's sort of a China policy making or China
Yeah.
policy implications question. And then I guess a bigger picture comment is, so a lot of these developing countries these days, the ones such as Brazil, South Africa,
Yeah.
India, they have impressive GDP growth rates, at least maybe if you go over several decades.
Yeah.
And many of them are introducing these conditional cash
Yeah.
transfers.
Mhm.
So the one in Brazil that a lot of people are familiar with, Bolsa Familia, you bring your children in, you promise to do inoculations and make sure they're going to school, and you get
Yeah.
a payment like that.
Mhm.
But it raises the question for me that is that also a stigmatizing process of public display? And does it make the kids stand out among their peers as the beneficiaries of the anti-poverty program? But so there's that question about where this fits among other
Yeah.
CCT, conditional cash transfer programs in the developing world, in the uneven developing world. And then also, is this dibao? It sounds to me like it has a great deal of, it's a CCT with a great deal of Chinese characteristics, both from the legacy of the socialism of the Iron Rice
Yeah.
Bowl, because many of the initial recipients were laid off workers from state-owned enterprises, and then maybe some other things about just that community knows the
Yeah.
sort of the ways that communities,
Yes.
urban
Very
communities
much.
will operate. So is this a distinct program that emerging out of China's economic transition? And if it is, I asked this question at a panel a couple of years ago. Is it possible to imagine dibao going away because everyone is above a minimum poverty line set by government officials, especially if they're being told
It
to
will be
eliminate poverty?
interesting.
I know how I'm going to do it. In my district, I'm going to
It
lower
will be
the
interesting.
lower the line so everybody's above it.
Yeah.
In the story.
Yeah.
So I mean, of course, with disabled populations and others of the that have eligibility for dibao, you can see that continue. You can always imagine that there'll be a small percentage of the population that is unemployed and maybe without family, just for whatever reason. But by and large, that number of urban going from
Yeah.
now it's down to what, 15 million?
Yeah.
Would
2%.
it
Yeah, 15
disappear?
million.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So those are just some initial thoughts, and you
Mhm.
don't have to answer all those, but
Yeah, no,
if you have any questions.
totally fascinating. I'm very curious to see what will happen because I'm doing a new project on Jinjun Fuping, the targeted anti-poverty campaign. I mean, right now it's almost like a political movement. Everybody, in one way or another, is involved in this. So there are different approaches. Some are moved, entire villages are moved to more prosperous areas so that the entire village can be lifted above poverty. There's also new investments in energy industry, which is forward-looking, but also as an effort to eliminate poverty. So it's a totally different anti-poverty approach. At the same time, we see that dibao is playing a smaller and smaller role in supporting the poor. So by 2020, if poverty is following this agenda and eliminated, where will dibao be, right? There will be a need. But would that fit the narrative? So it will be interesting
Migrant
discussion.
workers are if they're excluded now, but would they be eligible if they're workers?
Some
they're employed,
localities, Some localities are incorporating them into the dibao system, but those are the rich localities. Yeah. Many cannot afford to support migrants. Yeah, and migrants, only the long-term migrants can get it, right? There are short-term migrants who you're not contributing to my local economy. Why do I need to support your livelihood?
Only building buildings and
right.
streets.
Yeah, it's very, very contentious. But I think your comment about the CCTs, conditional cash transfers, is a great one. For unknown reasons, this puzzles me why the conditional cash transfers, which is not so much stigmatized, because the conditions are usually school attendance and healthcare. So all very positive in almost every culture, and focuses on children. So it's a great approach. I don't know why it didn't take root in China. Probably too much experimentation is involved, which could subject the experimentation to some scrutiny or judgment. I actually don't know, but I'm hoping some local governments would like to try it out and see whether it works or not. Your first comment about coordination among these different, often fragmented departments within the government would be so important. I really advocate for that in my book, because I mean, many of these families not only need the social assistance or social insurance, labor support, they also need Department of Health,
Healthcare,
Ministry of Health, Ministry of Education to come together to address these needs, which for them is a coherent kind of livelihood need. So how do we address that? I don't have a good solution, but I think it needs to be talked about and become awareness. Yeah, thank you.
Questions? Margot.
I'm Margot Landman with the National Committee. It's more a comment than a question. We all kind of gasped at the quotation of the person who said, or when you said, I won't take dibao because I don't want my child to be humiliated. We have free breakfast in this city for children who qualify. The kids won't eat it. Because
free breakfast
if they
is for everyone,
well,
actually.
now it is,
yeah.
but it
used to
wasn't.
not be? Okay.
It used to be only for people whose families were below a certain income. The kids wouldn't eat it. They'd go hungry because they were too embarrassed to be seen as needing this assistance.
Yeah.
So only recently has it been made universal. So now all the kids can have breakfast, nobody's embarrassed.
Yeah, that's forever challenge regarding welfare poverty. So thank you.
Okay, Yang and then Sada.
Hi, Dr. Gao. I have two questions actually. One, you
Can you
focus.
tell us who you are?
Oh yes, this is Yang Allen. I'm a PhD student from the New School for Social Research, Politics Department. So I have two questions in terms of the project. So who pays for the dibao actually? So it's a policy from the central government, and then the local ones initiates those policies. But still, where the money is from? So that's one question. The second one is, I think we probably focused on the governmental side too much. And there's definitely a lot of, so the middle class in China is enlarging, and there's a lot of philanthropical activists in China, and how could those people get involved? And social workers, of course, they could help the society, but at the same time, they're just too weak, I guess. So for those rich people or the rich the communities, maybe they could take some responsibilities of the helping war. Fighting with poverty in China. Yeah.
Very, very good questions. In terms of money, the local governments are responsible for paying for this program. If the local governments have the financial capacity, they pay for the entire budget. If they lack the capacity, the central government would transfer funds to pay for dibao. And in recent years, actually, the central government pays for a lot more than the local governments. But the transfer is unbalanced. the west region provinces get a lot of transfers. The central region actually suffers a bit because they are not considered too poor, but they don't get enough transfers. Yeah. So that's the financing aspect. In terms of the middle class growing in China, I agree with you. I mean, the civil society will grow, philanthropy will play a much larger role in supporting those who have needs. That will also depend on where these philanthropists want to invest their money, right? Education and healthcare are two very attractive areas. In terms of the broad middle class, it will be interesting. I think if we look at the US, right, welfare is still a very contentious topic. Who is deserving of the support? Whether we should demand you to do something in exchange for these benefits, whether we should give you cash or food stamps or something else, right? Those are difficult questions, and not all middle class people are for welfare support. So it will be very interesting. Thank you.
Yeah, I'm just wondering, Liu Sida from Toronto. I'm just wondering if you can talk a little bit about the policy making process for these policies because I mean you mentioned the Ministry of Civil Affairs played a dominant role, but also education and health, other ministries are involved. So for example, when they decide to expand the dibao from the urban areas to the rural area, which is a huge move. Yeah. So which actors were involved and what are the stakes, and are there any resistance in the process?
Yeah, so interestingly, rural dibao was experimented before the urban dibao. In some localities, one of the first ones was Shanghai, my hometown province. But because rural dibao is very hard to implement, right, to gauge people's income, to have the local governments committing a budget. So rural dibao happened very slowly and really didn't gain speed until much later. I think the Civil Affairs Ministry department always played a major role, but in the broad backdrop, there's always the function of maintaining social order. So because of that, the central government, the state council, is very supportive of this program. There were times in the history of dibao's development, there were possible concerns about threats to social stability, political stability, and those became the factors that lead to the expansion of this program, oftentimes from the central government. Yeah. And then the local governments would follow these broad regulations, and then they have to decide what would be the standard, how to implement the screening process. So those are localized. Thank you.
First here, and then I'm sorry I can't see the name cards, but yes, you,
Bing.
and then Lili. Yeah.
Hi, I'm Bing. I'm a social worker working at University Solomon. It's in Lower East Side. So I'm curious about the children, like the effects on children, because dibao started from 1993, and then it's nationally 1999. Now the then babies are young adults right now.
Yes.
So we always talk about like poverty as a cycle. It's hard to break it. It's important to break it using like a welfare system.
Yes.
So I'm just curious whether there's any research done to see whether if first generation hasn't moved out of the poverty status, whether the second generation was able to.
That's
Step up.
fascinating. That would be my next project. I mean, one thing I learned studying and now teaching in the US is there are just a lot more data collection efforts that are long-term, or what we call longitudinal studies. In the book, I propose China should do that. Without the tracking of these families, we cannot find them. It's very hard. Right now, I'm involved in a project that focuses on children and adolescents in these dibao families. So we plan to study them now, but also follow them over time to see how they progress over time. But your suggestion is wonderful, to find some people who are now young adults who received or were exposed to dibao when they were children and adolescents. What happened? That's wonderful.
Yeah,
Thank
I'm
you.
Curious.
Mhm.
Lily?
Thank you for your wonderful introduction. My name is Lily. I'm a this year Humphrey Fellow. It's a middle career Fulbright Fellow, and I work with committee right now. So for my personal experience, my grandma got dibao, and she, even we like family support her, but she feel very happy when she heard it's increased maybe $10 per year, and she feel like that's the thing I deserve from the country. When I was young, I contribute. Now I have this. So I have two questions. First is about the budget. Do we know the annual budget of how much our government invests on this, and how like the percentage of the whole governments? And the second one is about the fraud. If I'm not the target and I cheated, is there any punishment about this, or like a penalty, or it's
You
like
have a
a
pet? You mean you own a pet?
She's
Or-
got a cell phone.
or like the, I don't know, because I'm have 关系, I have the connection with
Yes, yeah.
Chunjiang, which
Yeah.
then I got this, so I don't know.
Yeah. So you raised some very good points, which I didn't get to cover in my talk. So among the dibao recipients, there are the more deserving ones and the less deserving ones, right? Typically, people think older people who really contributed to the country when they were young deserve it, and now they are not supposed to work in the labor market. And children are also often considered deserving. It's the working age adults who could work. People think they shouldn't be getting dibao. Of course, not always getting the full picture of their family care responsibilities. One person I quoted in the book, she has gynecological disease, and she says, people look at me, they think I have no issue. They cannot see my disease from my appearance. So that's a challenge. You have to expose that personal information so that people know you truly deserve the benefit. So among the dibao recipients, there's the differentiated treatment. The budget, the central government has overall budget. The local governments also have their budgets. I try to get the information about exactly how they do the budget. They wouldn't tell me. I had to try to understand it, but it's a low budget. Right now, about 0.2% of the GDP is spent on dibao. It's the minimum livelihood guarantee. It's kept minimum. So social assistance is never meant to be big in a country, but in the Chinese case, it's small, it's tiny. In terms of fraud, there are many. So it's not a pure good program. There's 人情保, which means I have 关系, I have social connections, then I may not really need it, but I can get it. There's 错保, 漏保, which means leakage and mistargeting. So there are frauds, and many local government officials got penalized for making those frauds. So it's an issue. But that also brought people's attention to further judge this program and say dibao isn't purely entirely justified. There are so many frauds in it. So that partly contributed to the narrowing of the coverage and decreasing in its emphasis, I think, in recent years.
Thank you.
Sarah?
Can you talk about what was dibao modeled on, or did the government compare other countries' systems of social assistance in developing dibao?
At the beginning, in the early 1990s, the Chinese government really tried to learn from other countries. I think more from Europe than the U.S. Also some other Asian countries as well, Japan, Korea, Singapore. So the broad model is there, but dibao is a very typical welfare program. So it's not an innovation.
Yeah.
You're poor, here's a standard, then we try to help you to meet this standard. So it's not so much of an innovation, but really it's the local governments, the first several cities who tried it and worked out how it could work, could be implemented.
Tweaked it,
Yeah.
Jan?
Jan Barris with the National Committee. Can you tell us a little bit about Xi Jinping's new program
Mhm.
and what the differences are between that and his new one and the dibao? And is there an idea that eventually the two will be melded together?
Excellent question. So the two are different because Jinzhen Fuping, the targeted anti-poverty campaign, focuses on rural poverty only. And so the goal is to use every possible means to eradicate poverty, rural poverty, by 2020. Because according to the official count, urban poverty is already eliminated. So rural poverty is the focus in this new campaign, and there are different approaches. One interesting approach they use is to pair these poor villages, households, with those companies or universities or governments or rich places, so that these other entities could help solve the poverty issue. So for example, some officials from rich cities are sent to these poor villages, localities. They bring resources, money, personnel, technology, and then help lift the local place out of poverty. There's also heavy investment, usually related to energy. Sometimes there are other interesting business models like plants. So this area, we decide that it's suitable for growing grapes or flowers for sale, then they promote such project. So it's very much central, top-down.
And which ministry is responsible?
The central, let's say the state council. So every ministry is involved in this. There's Fuping Ban, yeah. So there's an anti-poverty office that's
It's under the
coordinating.
Poverty Alleviation
Yeah.
Committee?
Yeah, coordinating, and every ministry participates in this effort. And it's similar to dibao, where everybody is targeted. Everybody who is targeted is known. There's a roster. So the first step is to do targeted identification of the poor. So every person in this village who is poor is put into this roster, and we will make sure you escape poverty by 2020. So through this means or that means. So it's very much a political campaign. Yeah, and you should all read this, The Last Toughest Mile, China's new approach to beating poverty, and that really shows what are done and why it's so difficult.
Larry?
Larry Bridwell, and I teach international business at Pace University. Could you comment on the fact that urban poverty no longer exists according to the government?
It's hard for me as a poverty scholar, right? I understand poverty not as an abstract issue. Poverty can be understood from many lenses: income, assets, consumption, deprivation, right? Whether you have electricity, flushing toilet, microwave, cell phone. There's also social capabilities, right? There's another poverty research, social capabilities, social involvement, fulfillment. So for me, poverty is dynamic and is also elusive. For me to say, here's poverty, we are going to take it away, is impossible. And many countries, developed countries, mostly Europe, the US is behind in this regard, use a relative poverty line. That is, poverty is not according to this one line. If the overall income distribution or wealth distribution in the society changes, we adjust where we define poverty, right? So if that's the case, poverty will always be with us, and I believe in that. So even according to the official narrative, 2%, 2.5% of urban residents still need the dibao to survive, and you cannot say they are not poor. And then there's also the huge migrants population, many of whom are also struggling with their livelihood. So I think, that's my take. That's
the basis,
issue.
the basis on which the
Well,
government
right.
aims to eliminate urban poverty is that
Right.
the absolute poverty line,
Right.
everyone's
Yeah.
above it.
So yeah.
The national,
Right.
which is including
Yeah.
the rural and the average,
Yeah.
yeah.
Because, you know, in terms of international business, there's a huge emphasis. Bill Gates, Melinda
Right.
Gates said in 2015 that absolute poverty will be eliminated from most of the world by 2030. So I think a lot of the emphasis is on absolute poverty. And then, you know, there's the other definition. Do you have electricity? Do you have
Yeah.
indoor plumbing? Do you have access to
Yeah.
medical care, education?
Yeah. Material deprivation is often the term.
And my business MBA students from China tell me that they're going to eliminate by 2020. And of course,
Yes.
you know, I have a lot of things to cover in class, so I don't go into some details. But what occurs to me is how,
Right.
and how is it going to be measured?
Yeah. And I mean, in this day of age, what do you consider to be poor or not, right? Is a cell phone necessary? What kind of education this child would need to be not deprived, to have a fair chance? So those are tough questions, and every one of us has values involved when we talk about these issues, right? As in this country, and it's part of the political debate about what we do, right? In terms of social security, welfare, food stamps, school lunch, breakfast. So they're going to be there, and I think it takes not only the kind of analysis we do, but also a reflection of our value system to understand those issues, and then bring that into the political debate. Do we have the resources to solve poverty, and do we have the political will to do that?
Thank you for the presentation, and I have two thoughts.
Can you introduce
One
yourself?
is,
Sorry, can you introduce yourself?
I'm Isha Kai. I'm a research associate at Columbia University right now. And one thought is about the point this professor at his university raised, and also about the comments raised by Dr. Gao, because which reminded me to think about one of the ongoing project I'm currently doing is measuring poverty in a U.S. context, but what we found is we couldn't just measure the disadvantaged people by only looking their movement along the poverty line. That's totally, it's not enough, because what we found is a lot of people were still struggling with material hardship. For example, like live paycheck by paycheck, especially in New York City, because the data set that we're using is the New York City data set. Live paycheck by paycheck, or they couldn't afford to go to the doctor because of lack of financial assets, and also if their utilities were cut off because lack of money, that kind of thing. So I think in American, people might tend to measure poverty in another land by using material hardship. But some of the people would argue that it's really hard to measure that,
Right.
or it's not that true, because maybe income still will be the predominant element that we will look at the disadvantage. That's what I'm thinking. And the other point is, I'm thinking, professor here, do you have an idea about what led to that situation? Because the previous research that we did about income inequality in middle income countries, we compared some set of middle what we argue is we want to see the role of private transfer on international comparison of poverty and inequality. And what we found is in China, there's a non-trivial share of resources were transferred out from the household in the poorest decile, in the lowest decile to other households, which were striking to us. And we didn't know the result, and also the reason, and also the tax and social transfer, like state transfer, were both not progressive in China. I mean, I don't know why the poorest people were taxing more, or I'm not sure.
You want to address that? Yeah, I
I
can.
think there are many sources of inequality and many sources of poverty, and the higher income countries use their tax code to subsidize or help favored groups and sometimes help lower income groups. I think I was looking at my phone so much in the New York Times last night for various reasons, but there's a great New York Times Magazine article, I think it will appear this Sunday, on America's #1 cause of income inequality, and it's the housing subsidy for interest rate. You deduct so much taxes when you have an interest for your interest rate on your mortgage. It's just a terrible program that skews inequality towards subsidies towards the middle class and taxes away from the lower income groups.
The upper middle.
Upper middle,
I mean, I would just comment on your thought, your observation that the lowest income group often transfer out quite a bit in China. And I also observed the same thing. I mean, often these dibao recipients,
their income moves.
Yes,
to
because so my neighbor has a funeral or wedding, and that's a substantial amount, and I cannot afford not to give that because I live in this neighborhood. Our social relations, the cohesion, the harmony is so important. And that's, I mean, I've lived in this country for 16 years. Sometimes it still shocks me when I talk to my parents who says to me, we give this much to this family, this friend for, in my hometown area. If a child celebrates the 12th year birthday, it's a big deal, and you have to give a few $100s. And for people like my parents who are not poor, but they are not earning a lot of money, they are retired, that adds up. And we didn't know this. My siblings and I all live away from home, but my parents still give on our behalf. So at some point we realized we need to calculate that and give back. We owe them so much. We didn't know.
Now.
I know. And I mean, for the poor people, they don't live in vacuum. They have to. That's big, and that's how they belong. And probably more important for them that they are already singled out for receiving the welfare benefit. That they need to be part of the community, participating. Yeah.
I'm going to keep that last comment away from my 11-year-old son. So we give a big hand now to